Welcome back to another video. Here I am showing my trades that I made a couple of days ago. The phantom short, that's increased. I think this was about 75% yesterday. It's gone to 110%. And the injective trade, that might have been about 50% yesterday, and that's now increased to 91%. So that's really good. The phantom long that I had from a couple of weeks ago, it was a lot longer that I had this open. That's come down in profits, and that's okay because I took the majority of profits at when it was about 85% in profit. I took about 75% profit from that, and this will stop me out at about 25% profits. So I'm happy with that. If it stops me out, that's fine. So let's have a look at the charts. Now, I guess one of the things I wanted to discuss was this. You know, I came up with this quote here. We don't know the future when we make a trade, so look to the past to predict today. It's not exactly the same, and that's okay. It's a safe place to train and refine your game. So you can look to the past to refine your game in trading, okay? And that's what I like to do. I like to test out strategies on the past because essentially we don't know what's coming at this part of the market. It's all big black space here. We don't know what's happening. So all we're trying to essentially do is put probability in our favor because we don't know what's on that side of the chart. Your role as a technical analysis is similar to that as a detective, okay? And what's the best thing to do as a detective? It's to look at what data you do have, okay? It's to look at the data you do have. So I'm gonna kind of focus on, let's have a look. Let's have a look at just using trend lines, okay? We're just gonna have a look at trend lines and the fib levels, okay? The fibs. Now these are just some of the things I sort of look out for when I'm making a trade. You can pause it at any point and have a look at it, but I'm going to go for it in future videos and things like that and show you how I use it, okay? But I'm mainly going to focus on the fibs and the trend lines. So let's do that on some past data. So this is actually a pattern, so I'm going to briefly talk about patterns. So a pattern is that I've got here is this ascending triangle, right? I drew that here and I drew that line up there, okay? That's an ascending triangle. Ascending triangles have a higher probability of breaking to the upside, okay? And you might be asking, like, well, what made you draw it as an ascending triangle? What about this bar here? What about this bar? This bar sort of popped out and came back in. Well, if I was to change it to like a weekly chart, you'll see that it didn't, you know, that's the candle body. That's part of the candle body. It's still within it. You don't even really see it, do you? That's the danger of sometimes trading on a smaller time frame. So if I go back to the daily, you can see that you've got a bit more information of it coming out, coming back in. And if you go to like the 4 hourly, it's even worse. Do you know what I mean? So you could say, well, why didn't you draw the line like this? You know, trying to capture these highs. And it's the same principle, really. It's because the lower term timeframes aren't as accurate. I became a much more successful trader when I took into account the macro. And if you haven't watched the previous video that I made yesterday. That goes into a bit more details about macro, but I'll make more videos as time goes on. But for now, let's just focus on what's going on. So the ascending triangle, that's how I saw it. That's how I saw it. Broke out. But why did I have these targets here? Why have I got these lines here? Well, basically what that is, I've just used this tool here, this trend tool right here. What's it called actually? Trend line. Trend line here. And basically, I've drawn a line from the top of the triangle when it gets created to the bottom. Okay, that's when it was created here. And I essentially take that out. So when the breakout happens, that's where you apply it. And that's where your target is. Okay, same with the bottom. Okay. Same with the bottom. That's why I had these two targets. I was waiting for this to occur. Okay. I didn't run and jump into shorting it here, even though we started to break down. And that's because we're on the 4 hourly. I like to wait for the close, and you can see the close here. It closes back inside the triangle, which still led me to believe that we're likely to push up out of it. Okay. That's why I was still quite bullish in this ascending triangle. So I've got an ascending triangle, closes inside the triangle, even when we're getting pushed down. And then obviously, of course, we've got major resistance up here. So that's why I was happy to take some profits there. Okay, cool. You can become a much better trader by just charting trend lines. just like this one here, just like charting this trend line here. So let's sort of do a test on this, all right, using trend lines, fibs, and all that good stuff. So here I am on the BLX chart. That's Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Liquid Index, which is an amalgamation of all of the top exchanges. It's 24 hours late, as I've discussed in the previous video. We're at November 2022, the bottom of the bear market, the bottom of this current cycle. Okay, so let's kind of imagine, this is a good test for you when you want to test out some strategies. Imagine like that this data, everything on from this point isn't here. Okay, everything from this point isn't here. I'm going to give you an example of how you could trade the market. So here's my fib retracement tool. Okay, we don't have the data that's all the way here on the right. All right, let's imagine there's no data there. So we've put in this sort of top here, and that's all we have. But we have this bottom. All right, why I sort of take this into account is because we've sort of come out of this top here. We've broken out of it. You can see if you measure it here, if you look alongside horizontally over here, we had a bit of resistance, but we broke out. Okay, so I'm measuring this point here. So I'm going to grab the bottom to the top. There we go. And let's push it to the side. So remember, this high hasn't come into play yet. We've only got this high. So I'm going to drag it along. Now imagine this. I'm going to drag it along. I'm still holding this high up here. We've shot through. Everyone's bullish. The FOMO starts to kick in. Okay, the FOMO starts to kick in. You start thinking to yourself, I've missed it. Okay, and then the idea is that it wants to pull you in the market here. Okay, we haven't dropped down to its 50%. You would have had to have waited days for it to come back to its 50%, but eventually it did. So it's somewhat about having patience as well. It's very important to have patience in the market. You know, they often say something like the wealth is transferred from the impatient to the patient, sorry. Okay, wealth is often traded from the impatient to the patient. And you can see, if you waited until this breakout happened, you would have had to have waited weeks for it to come back and retested this 50%. Okay, even though this high wasn't even in yet, it's still respected. Okay, let's imagine you missed that. All right, you do the same thing. I'm grabbing the top fib here, and I'm going to grab it to the top here. When the top comes in, I'm going to grab it here, and I'm going to move it to its next low right here, which is there. All right, so I'm measuring this low here and that high up there. All right, and I'm just going to drag it across so we got it's covering a wider length of time. Okay, you can see it was respected again. Up here, 50% respected, comes along. Okay, it was actually respected for so long. Okay, so long this was respected for. 50%. That's bullish. Double bottom here, and away we go. All right, you could have drew a trend line here. And you can see it. There's a trend line, respected this resistance, come down here. Not exactly the exact spot, but that's okay. Respected it as resistance, third time, and then the breakout. Didn't even get much of a retest, and away she goes. Okay, so that's a way you can use the fib retracement and trend lines. That's how you can use the trend lines. Using these tools will make you a much better trader. Much better. Some people only use trend lines and fib retracements, and it can make you a much better trader. So keep that in mind.